Research that we can't carry. It's weighted keys. But it's weighted keys.
All right, so good afternoon. I'm Lindsay Cohen. I'm the interim dean for the College of Arts and Sciences, and I just want to welcome you all. Also want to let you know, virtual folks, live folks, we're recording today's event, but thank you for joining us in honoring the life and legacy of Dr. Ahmed Abdelal. So I did not have the privilege of knowing Ahmed. I've been here 20 years, and I feel like I've known him. From the moment I came in 2004, I heard his name, and I've heard about him ever since. And he's clearly in the fabric of our college. In my time, I've aimed to sort of follow in the path that he set up. I mean, he set us on an incredible course during his time, and we have continued in a really positive and strong trajectory. So the fact that he served as dean of our college for a decade speaks volumes about his talent and dedication as a leader. And I've done it for just since January. It's been a lot, but a decade is really impressive. Prior to serving as dean, Ahmed led the Department of Biology for over a decade. And many of the programs and activities that we celebrate and that we delight in and are so proud of today were really started during his time, started by him and by his administration. He expanded the college and university research infrastructure, paved the way for innovative academic programs and interdisciplinary centers. For example, he formed the Middle East Studies Center, as well as two of our departments, the Department of Africana Studies and the Department of Institute for Women's Gender and Sexuality Studies. And they're both celebrating 30-year anniversaries. Ahmed's leadership helped lay the foundation for the academic and research successes as well. They positioned Georgia State as a leading research institution. And it should be noted, he did not do this alone. And many of his colleagues who worked alongside Ahmed are here with us today, and they continue in his tradition of what I've learned about him: hope, growth, forward thinking, positivity, and humor. We are fortunate to have several of them here with us who will speak about him. We'll get to hear directly from them. And we'll also get to hear from Ahmed in a video. If you weren't able to see it in advance, I think it's a really impressive video. So to introduce the next segment, Dr. Tim Crimmins, Emeritus Professor of History, is here with us. And thank all of you all again, virtual live, for honoring Dr. Ahmed Abdelal.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dean. Historical perspective. When Ahmed Abdelal arrived here at Georgia State in 1976, Georgia State had been named a university for only 6 years. Georgia State was still mostly a night school with a pretty strong business college. But the hiring expansion of the university in the 1960s and 70s had produced a research-active faculty in many, many disciplines. On his arrival, Ahmed began collaborating with other researchers in the sciences. In time, he expanded his scope. He helped to restructure the University Senate to assist in his enterprise. He recruited many in this room as partners in his work. Ahmed was a man of vision and great political skill. He built alliances throughout the college in his endeavor to expand research and to strengthen undergraduate and graduate academic programs. He also brought international collaboration. In the course of his time here, as the dean has said, he reshaped the college and the university. In May of 2015, Ahmed sat for an interview in which he detailed his career path here at Georgia State. Carol Winkler, Hal Jacobs, and I edited this 120-minute interview into a shorter format, which we'll now present. Presenting Ahmed on Ahmed.
So I came from the University of California at Davis to the biology department at Georgia State. And I came as an associate professor. The early projects really was to get a doctoral program. And that was a long-term project, it turned out to be. And that doctoral program was actually joined with chemistry. And so Dave Boykin, who was then chair of chemistry, and I were the key advocates, visiting people wherever we thought they could help us. But the interesting thing, really, when I reflect on it, is how Bill Suttles was critical in securing the doctoral program. And while he didn't really care for the natural sciences, especially for the evolution part, but it didn't affect him. You know, he was supportive. He must have invited practically everybody from the Board of Regents in different subgroups to come, bring them to Kell Hall, the then science facilities, and talk about what we needed to do. And he was equally supportive of getting the first modern science facility that Georgia State then had. And I consider that to be one of the significant steps for Georgia State to become competitive as a full-fledged state university and national university. When I became chair, one of the first challenges was how to get that department that literally had 4 or 5 separate groups that sometimes or often were hostile to each other, how to get them to be collaborative. And actually that was good learning grounds, because if you could get this 4 or 5 desperate groups to collaborate, you probably can get anybody to collaborate. And so I learned really in my first 2-3 years in administration that this is a key challenge, and how to work with the faculty to get them to unify behind the common goals, instead of fighting about the goals that are not shared, you know. And so in many ways, it is really identifying the goals that everybody agrees on, or most people agree on, and saying what they think we can do about this. And then this way you can get people to coalesce. One of the key elements in advancing Georgia State, from my perspective, was to actually have doctoral programs and facilities to do natural sciences. But the second point was getting significant dollars from the Georgia Research Alliance to support research at Georgia State. The Georgia Research Alliance ended investing significant resources, many millions of dollars. I don't really know how many, but we recognized also that that was going to be a key project in the state, and that we needed to be in it. That's why we kind of, just stayed on top of it. Dave Boykin and I went to every meeting, and of course, being since this was started by the state, they were sensitive to public debate. And so we were pretty effective in public debate. So I can actually claim that we shifted their direction as well by collaborating with the University of Georgia in drafting a framework for development of biotechnology and allied areas in support of economic development in the state. And then that kind of branched to other areas, like communication, digital communications, came out of the initial, and also computing. And then the development of the neurosciences was really equally important. And they actually provided a channel to have an alliance with Emory, where the neurosciences are important. So really through the biological sciences, we had the alliance with the University of Georgia, and through the neurosciences, we had a significant alliance with Emory. And that enabled the natural sciences and the neurosciences and psychology to advance. And we were able to hire this significant nationally recognized senior professors. The development of the University Senate as an effective framework was really an important development at Georgia State as well. I think the remarkable thing actually about Georgia State was how accomplished faculty got involved in this faculty in the University Senate significantly. The faculty were really collaborative and cohesive. So I think the development of faculty governance, effective faculty governance, with serious roles for faculty representatives. Georgia State might be one of the top 10% in the United States in terms of having such a model. When then Dean Faulkner left, and I wasn't really interested or keen on becoming dean. In many ways, my administrative career developed not by my plan. It was just where I was and what was happening. And so I think actually Bob Arrington became acting dean. But I think within the year, he just came one morning and said, I really don't like the dean's position. And I said, but you really should do it. So while I have not thought that, I guess I was sufficiently egotistical to say, well, maybe I should. His argument was that there are not many people who can do it well, but you can, And so I became a candidate for the dean's position. The College of Arts and Sciences had a lot of work that needed to be done. One of my contributions really at Georgia State is actually working with the chairs of arts and sciences and developing a model for leadership in the college. Many faculty members, when they assume administrative positions, they kind of take the existing policies somewhat as biblical and not to be fussed about. But we actually, luckily, we did have a lot of policies. And what was there wasn't great either. We did a lot of policies, whether it was faculty workload, promotion and tenure, how to determine salaries, And then we started going to national meetings and presenting our work on faculty policies. And that's what led the Harvard School of Education to come and visit with us. And then they wrote, they considered it a significant case and to study the development of these policies and working and getting them to be effective and connected. So whenever we were developing any policy, we first had kind of an intensive group developing a proposal. Then we took it to the Dean's Council, the Chair's Council, and the chairs just went at it until they were comfortable with the draft. And independently, I took it to the College Executive Committee, which was elected and had 15 members. So it was a significant representative body also. And really, when we had the two drafts and we worked to align them, and then had a final draft that we then shared with the full faculty, I think that process, which was obviously democratic, but guided, by the dean and the chairs, I think was an important way of doing business. And it actually was able to address major issues that haven't been addressed in many universities. Really trying to figure out first what should the salary be was the first challenge. And I think we ended concluding that we should compare salaries within each broad disciplinary area. So we, because that accepts that there is a market that you have to deal with, and that market is discipline-based. But then also one very important premise was to provide equal salaries for equal merit. So when it comes to adjusting of salaries, which we did in significant ways, it was based on that equal compensation for equal merit, rather than equal compensation simply based only on discipline and not rank and merit. You know? And I think that was important, and we called it merit equity, which was a new term. Part-time faculty is a national challenge. I think it is much better to find a different model for how to use or deploy faculty members, and what the College of Arts and Sciences then did. And I think that was very significant, to get out of the army of part-time people and have full-time faculty that have offices, because the part-time people don't have offices. And so not only is the part-time instructor is roving, but you can't find them to ask them questions. So it's not a great learning model, because they are not available to advise the students or actually do service in the department or the college. Whereas the full-time non-tenure track person or lecturer, as they were called here, is available for service. And they can advise the students, and the students knows where they are, and they have office hours. So there's no doubt that the quality of learning is better, and the cost is not significantly higher. That really is the interesting thing. So at this point, this remains a national problem, that the top research universities in the country have 60% of their courses taught by part-time faculty. It's not necessary. And I would offer them the model that Georgia State adopted. One thing we haven't talked about is international. And I'd just like to, since this is close to my heart, I would like to say a few words about it. Really, during Ron Henry's tenure as provost, and also Carl Patton as president, Georgia State had tremendous increase in its international activities. And that involved a lot of projects, and these projects often were collaborative between the various colleges. But the combined activities were very significant. I think soon after I left Georgia State, I had Ron Henry call me and say, I just wanted to know that we got the recognition by, let's see, it's APLU, Land Grant and Public Universities. They gave the first award for recognition of international that they just established. Georgia State got that. And he was very proud of that, but he also recognized and wanted me to know that he obviously recognized that I had a significant role in that. But I think the international role is important. It establishes the university more as a national research university, and it also then attracts international students more. I don't think you really can have a rising national university that doesn't have significant international profile. I think there's no doubt in my mind that I experienced just a very significant transformation of Georgia State. I think the university that I joined as an associate professor of biology had strengths, but it was uneven strengths, and probably didn't really have enough confidence as a research university. So research was kind of there, but it was fragmented. I think the university that I left was really, no doubt, was a national research university and had significant research funding and advanced doctoral programs in every area. And I think it's a university that was increasingly recognized. So the order of magnitude is high. You know, and those 10 years, I think, were very significant in the development of Georgia State.
Okay, it's pretty clear Ahmed had a plan, and he was persistent as he could be in terms of seeing it through with his guidance, of course. But I would tell you that almost any good administrator I would think of has a plan, is persistent in putting it together, and uses some firm guidance to get it there. I don't think that's what made Ahmed, because yes, he was good, but he was a whole lot better than good. He was extraordinary. And when I think about why I believe he was, I think it is the fact that the man had an uncanny ability to build community. And he did it all kinds of ways. We all came together and danced and talked the night away at his parties. He married well, so we all descended on his home way too many times that a normal spouse would have put up with. He came to our departments every year to hear what we cared about and what we wanted to think about. And he even recognized what we considered our achievements by when you invited him something as a chair. It was, I don't know, let's say you were having an event or a recognition ceremony or something, he showed up. He truly believed in the community of the place, and as a result, I think it is fair to say that we all became engaged. We all had a stake in the development of Georgia State, and we all felt like our contributions were going to make a difference. I think it's fair to say when Ahmed built community, though, it wasn't his parties and it wasn't him showing up. The place I saw the most community being built while he was here was in the Chairs Council and the Senate. He truly did want to bring together people that were super wicked smart, as he says, as well as trying to get those people engaged in what was going on. And I can tell you from my personal experience that he really did not want to leave anybody behind that were in those communities. And if he felt like somebody felt that way, he worked to fix it. And I'll just give you a quick example of that. And it was basically at the very beginning of Ahmed's term. And let me just say, I don't think I'm going to do too much history here to say at the time, let's just say that males dominated the leadership ranks of Georgia State in pretty extraordinary numbers. Okay? That included the Chairs Council that only had 5 women in it. So what the women of the Chairs Council did was we would meet, there were 5 of us out of about 30, 35, something like that. We would go out once a month to talk and mentor each other, figure out what our challenges were, how we can make those work. But occasionally when we were talking, a subject would come up and we would all agree to it. And one of those times, the subject was the fact that we didn't feel heard in Chairs Council. You know what it is. The woman speaks, she's ignored. 3 speakers later, a man says what the woman just said. The heavens open up, the tablets come down, and this is an idea that we must implement. We all felt that. So we decided as the women's group that we were going to fix the culture of the Chairs Council. And what we did was we decided that if we agreed with what one of the other women in the Chairs Council said, we would start our comment, we'd raise our hand to say what we wanted to say, but we'd start our comment with, I agree with Paula, or I agree with Lauren, or whatever it happened to be. It was only a couple of weeks later, we were in the middle of Chairs Council, and there was a lively debate going on, and I can't remember what the policy topic was that we were on, but we were in the midst of it. And my friend and colleague Diane Folks raised her hand and made a comment. And I will tell you, I don't know if she'd been asleep, if she was confused, or if her mind just wandered off. But let's just say her comment had absolutely nothing to do with the conversation topic that was going on. But I sat there and I went, well, I do agree with that. So up went my hand, and Ahmed called on me, and I looked at him and I said, I agree with Diane, and then proceeded to talk. If I could translate the look he gave me at that moment, I think it's fair to say, have you had a lobotomy? And I just smiled back in return. So his face changed, and then he was completely and totally confused. And he's just looking at me, and I'm continuing to smile at him, and we're just having our moment. And it was as if the light bulb went off over his head, like in the cartoons. Because he looked at me, and then his eyes went. And first he looked at Paula, and Paula was grinning at him. And then he looked at Lauren, and Lauren was smiling at him. He went all around to all the women in the room, and at that moment, even though my male partners in the Chairs Council might not have noticed, the power relationships in the Chairs Council changed. And now we were all equal members. Now we were all people that would be heard, and Ahmed fixed it and fixed it right then. We talked about it later. None of the women felt ignored anymore. We were all part and parcel of what the community was. And there was no big public display about how the women felt on the Chairs Council, but he fixed it, and he fixed it because he knew this community wasn't working, and that mattered to him. One of the benefits of the community, part of Ahmed's leadership, is that he left us with a bunch of dear, dear friends, because we learned to respect each other. We learned to understand that we did have differences. We all listened to each other. All of that happened whether we were on the Senate, whether we were in the Chairs Council, or wherever. And as a result, when we made this event and put this event together, when we reached out to people, it was not hard to get people who wanted to speak. And so let me start by, we had 6 people that volunteered and wanted to do it, and I'm to introduce them. So let me quickly tell you who they are. I think most of you know them, and then we'll roll from there, and there will be a moment for everybody else as well. First speaker will be Chuck Derby. He was Associate Dean of Natural and Computational Sciences, and he was a Regents Professor. Now imagine he stays on the beach and enjoys himself. Elliot Albers will be second. He is also a Regents Professor, and he also was the director of the Neuroscience Institute. P.C. Kyle finished up the science group, and he was the chair of biology and also a Regents Professor. And that's when biology grew and truly became, I think it's fair to say, what it is today. Then we'll shift a little bit and move to what Ahmed contributed to the college and the university. And so we'll start with Paula Dressel, who was the Associate Dean of Social and Behavioral Sciences. Now she's Vice President of Just Partners, and she was the Director of Planning, Research, and Development for the Casey Foundation. So she took her community building skills that she learned, and she moved them out of here for the benefit of others. Then we'll have Pam Lombardi speak. She's also a research professor. She was Associate Dean for the Fine Arts under Ahmed, and I guess it's fair to say, if I was going to sum her up, she is all over the world. She is trying to fix our world. She wins awards every time she turns around. But the bottom line is she's extraordinary in her own right. And then we'll sum it up. Our last speaker will be Bill Fritz. When I knew Bill, he was nothing but a chair of geology, but he's moved on. He became Associate Professor of Academic Programs and the Chief Enrollment Officer here at Georgia State. But then he went on, and now he's the President of Staten Island University. All these people are extraordinary, just like all the people that when you think about the community that we got to know under Ahmed and because of Ahmed, because we wouldn't if he hadn't been here. Thank you.
Hey there. So I wanted to share my perspective as a new faculty member in biology because it was about almost 40 years ago that I came into biology at Georgia State, and Ahmed was chair, and it was clear he was up to something. He was in the midst of transforming biology into an idea that he had. As he described, most of the university's focus was on teaching, and there were significant research going on as he described, but he wanted to make biology a real research entity. But of course, Ahmed not only had that vision, he had a plan and he had a skill set that enabled to do it. So coming into a department as a kind of just out of a postdoc, you don't see these things. So it's taken some time to see Ahmed at work. So when I arrived, Ahmed had been chair for a few years, and so his plan was already underway. And so what was it? Well, when during my time there, let's say as a junior faculty member of 5 years, hiring new faculty that shared his vision and let's say shared his vision came on. So Don Edwards arrived a few years before I did the name game. Terry Fry was 1 or 2 years before me. Barbara Baumstark and I came in at about the same time. Elliot came in the next year, Tim Bartness. So this is a group that, and this is probably more heavily towards neuroscience since I work with those faculty more. That was the cohort that he brought on. And so he was, besides bringing in these faculty, he was changing the culture and the mission, the organization, and all that. So how do you do that? So I don't know if you watched the debate, but I had my buzzword bingo card on, and we could probably play that game here, and based on what people say. But Ahmed has some words that he often used, and balance was one of them. He would tell us, mission is teaching, research, and service. Right? And you got to do all of them. And not everybody did them all equally well, but balance was important. He led by example. You saw that, he was, I don't know the first, but one of the first to have external funding from National Science Foundation. He had a wonderful research program, graduate students, postdocs, and he was teaching while he was there. Of course, resources were important. Before James Carville made it sexy, he was using the term, it's a budget stupid. I don't know exactly all the dynamics in establishing the indirect cost policy that we had past tense, he was effective at getting that through, I'm sure, and he was very persuasive, and probably he used the argument like 0%, 50% of zero is zero, right? So he brought the money back to college somehow. He didn't. For some reason, he was able to get the college to pass it off to the departments. And he shared that within the department with the faculty that generated it. So it was a real sort of a positive feedback loop. And I know he would support, had policies of half of the department or half of the salary for a postdoc coming from this indirect return. Anyway, so the other term I remember being used was the goose that laid the golden egg, and don't kill that goose. That was his way of continuing the growth of the department, even if it seemed like it was over-resourced. Power of persuasion is something that Ahmed had, and I could speak on that for some time, but it's often the little things that he did. I mean, he had great skills, of course, but it's just little things sometimes. And the examples I know is he remembered everybody's spouse or partner or the name of that person. And I remember I'd been at the department for maybe a month or two. Christmas time was coming around, holidays were coming around. And he walks in with his check, and it was probably like for $50 or something. But he said, "This is your bonus," you know. It's like, that little thing. So he knew how to reward people. Finding allies, Organ in chemistry, Rumbaugh in psychology. He put junior faculty, and somehow we were on all the committees as junior faculty, and that was pretty amazing. So he would find and create, and I do agree with Carol that he wanted everybody to be his ally, but for those that weren't, he had ways as well. And just as an example, without any names, we had a very rigorous pre-tenure annual review process that was in place. So he quickly built this department. It was great, and then he left, and he became acting associate dean. And I don't believe that he didn't act as science. But he was soon dean. But what he had done, as me Carol said, he had really built up this structure and community of leadership and engagement. So even though we were all very disappointed for him leaving the department, it flourished under the next leadership. And some of those people speak. Thanks.
Well, it's great to see so many colleagues here from so many different eras of my career. I think we all agree that Ahmed was a remarkable scientist, educator, and administrator. He was a very direct yet comprehensive, compassionate leader. I don't exaggerate when I say I got all my skills in terms of administration from him. I think of him every time I would come to a problem, and there was always an Ahmed solution. I learned the perils of tribalism from him. I don't know if that's a term that you all are associated with Ahmed, but that was one of his key ones on how to get people together. He expected the most out of everyone and would call out problems and incompetence. Once when Ahmed felt the university mail service wasn't delivering the mail as quickly as it should, he went to the post office and he complained to the post office staff in no uncertain terms. A couple of days later, he found out that it wasn't their fault. So he went back to the post office and he carried boxes of candy and gave a box of candy to everybody he had chastised the other day. He was very creative in approach to faculty recruitment. When faculty recruits came to Georgia State, they were shown Kell Hall, and that obviously was not very impressive in terms of So he had a little solution to this. One of the best equipped labs in Kell Hall at the time was the EM lab, and I think that was the lab that was in that picture in the film. And so whenever a new faculty recruit would come through, and they would ask to see what kind of lab space they might get when they came to Georgia State, Ahmed always took them to the EM lab. And although many of us were shown the EM lab over the years, none of us ever ended up there. Ahmed always found a way to get new space and to get that space renovated, so it was really quite good. Recognizing the tremendous limits of our scientific infrastructure, Ahmed was really one of the driving forces behind this new building, the Natural Science Center. Because of his vision for this building, we had the first really modern infrastructure for biomedical science at Georgia State, and that was the Natural Science Center. Because of his vision for this building, we really did have outstanding laboratory space, but unfortunately he was so good at recruiting faculty that by the time the building was built, it was too small, and he started his next journey to begin the work towards the Chief Science Center. When I arrived at Georgia State, the development of the PhD in biology had only recently occurred, and Ahmed had talked a little bit about this in the film. At the time, the Board of Regents was extremely sensitive about duplicating programs, so that's why it was very difficult to try to get a PhD in biology or chemistry, because they already existed. So it created an opportunity, but you had to have a lot of creativity to get this done. So as Ahmed had mentioned, he and Dave Boykin got together, and they tried to identify a field that wasn't represented someplace in the university system. And what they found after all this diligence was that there was no PhD in microbial and biochemical sciences. So they went ahead and had a campaign to establish this degree at the Board of Regents level, and they got this approved. And so all of the students in biology at the time, whether they were in endocrinology, neuroscience, basic physiology, got a PhD in microbial and biochemical sciences. And they were, the students were kind of excited about this because we did now have a PhD program, but then they lost some of their enthusiasm when they found out they had to take P-Chem and biochemistry as part of the process. Ahmed was the model of what a great administrator should be. Most importantly, he had a real vision for making Georgia State a research university, and he was remarkably effective in articulating how to get there and in bringing people together to accomplish it. He consistently found ways to solve small problems as well as really large problems, and he always did it with creativity and transparency. I think we all agree that Georgia State would not be what it is today without having had him here. Thanks.
Hi. Actually, by the time I arrived in Georgia State in 1991, biology and chemistry, the science is already at the nucleus, but still sort of fragmented. I remember that at that time, the research had to borrow some equipment from a teaching lab. I mean, lab have their own equipment, but in general, they still have to borrow equipment from the teaching lab, and you have to return it, so it's very confusing. So when I first came, Georgia had just started an initiative called Georgia Research Alliance, and the idea is to have 6 universities combined with industry development for economic development. So I guess by the reason Ahmed recruited me here is because I was working on a project which is related to this. By that time, they already finished the biotechnology. So Ahmed, actually, Terry probably know that Georgia Research Alliance formed 3 major groups, 3 consortia, and medical genetics is already sort of assigned or already said they're going to be one of them. But Ahmed never see that as a fixed idea. So he worked with Lasando of University of Georgia, June Scott of Emory, and formed what we call a biotechnology group, a consortium to develop. That, of course, involves some molecular genetics and all that, neuroscience and chemistry. So when I first came in 1991, he said, PC, you have to work on this Georgia Research Alliance biotechnology program. So I work on protein secretion and antibiotics. He said, well, this is your way to get your startup money. So I have no startup money except to get the money from Georgia Research Alliance. So at the time, Ahmed was the chair. But by the time I came here, he went to Dean's office. And much because of that, he then told me, PC, you have to take care of biology. This is when he became dean. And then he assigned Dave Boykin and I to work with Georgia Research Alliance to get funding, major funding from Georgia Research Alliance. Anyway, that is what started. Now, at the time, Nature Science Center actually is half shell. I don't know if people remember. When they first moved into Georgia Nature Science Center, because there's not enough money, the fourth floor and half of third floor is not, again, they call it share, right? And there are only 2 elevators in the whole building. So we actually worked through the year to get to the research line to fund what we call a core facility. The core facility come up because, as I said, all these nuclears have their own research equipment, but for common equipment, there's no such thing. So we thought the way to establish the science or to expand the science in biology and chemistry is to have some core facility with all the modern art equipment, and of course also to finish those space. So actually, we ended up when I was chair, I think we ended up about $40 million from Georgia Research Alliance in building the lab as well as research equipment. Also, the science annex was furnished because of that. Now, area later on get some Georgia Research Alliance money to build up the second floor, but that's later on, right? In any way, I see this as a way to enhance the science. Now, of course, you all heard about all are in one budget. Everyone heard that, right?
Yes, yes.
So everyone thought Ahmed favored science. I would actually argue the other way around, because he wants us to fund the money from outside, so he had money to develop for the other area, like humanity and all that. And he established a center for biology, or the biotech and drug design, but also he established a lot of center. I think the idea of all in the one budget and he get science to get the outside funding and then allow the college to develop the other center was really a very good model. Now we then, as part of the recruitment, we actually recruit Julia Hilliard as the first Georgia Research Alliance eminent scholar. Actually, it's very, very creative because she needed to set up a BSL-4 high security lab. And so we had to find a way to do it. So through Georgia Research Alliance, we actually borrow money from Red Creek because we don't have enough money. We have to, Ahmed, of course, have to use the card as what do you call it? Whatever. Best to say that card to guarantee the return of money. And this is where the indirect costs come up very nicely. I think Chuck mentioned about indirect cost, but the idea then was to use eminent scholarship, lots of funding, and the indirect costs would then go pay back the endowment. So that was actually the first of that idea as well. Later on, I think BE Wang also come up with some same model until much later then Mark Baker then changed that. But at the beginning, we have to find a way to fund the endowment, and we have to borrow money to build this facility. Now, with all this advanced core facility, then we have been able to recruit faculty in biology and chemistry and neuroscience as well. So that, I think, is the foundation for the research in the Georgia State. I think by that time, he left. I think we are pretty funded in biology and chemistry. Physics, I don't know why we didn't get that much. Sorry. But biology and chemistry are really working together and getting all this thing. We later on also, Georgia Research Alliance also want to build what they call an incubator. So I should mention Mike Cassidy because he's the major player since 1992 to work with us on Georgia Research Alliance stuff. He wants to have an incubator lab to encourage the industry, have some small lab, a startup company in the university, and to use our core facility and to be able to interact with the faculty and staff. So Ahmed then allow us to use the old physics lab in the KL on the fifth floor. I think you probably know. So we set up a collect pack over there, and then over the year, actually it become very, very successful. So it then become later on, then I think Robin and Roland moved that into the Science Center, not Science Center, Central Center, to form a new, still active collect pack. But it's really the first in the state for it to develop, and then become a model for UGA, Emory, and all that for the incubator. But because of the vision from Ahmed, that we really set up the first one. I guess you already know all the research center and international program. I think one thing I want to mention especially is that Ahmed and I went to Tsinghua University, and we collaborated with a guy, and then the director of the institute came to visit us in a hotel. And we talked to him, and he said, well, we really send some our staff, young faculty to Georgia State. And Ahmed said, sure. So he actually, on the spot, allowed to agree to pay for a postdoc to come in to work with Dave Boykin. That actually worked out very well. It actually turned out to, they formed a collaboration, they formed a patent, and they actually get a $500,000 grant to the Georgia State. Not a grant, the patent fee. So that was actually also very nice. They get a 500. Yeah. So anyway, I just want to end up by saying that a lot of the work end up Roland Adamson and Robin Morris continue this process, and so it really makes the science develop well. Thank you.
So I'll shift gears to the Dean's office in my time as Associate Dean for the Social Sciences. To so many people in here, Ahmed was a dear colleague and friend. He was an incredible mentor, and he was truly a good soul. His leadership at Georgia State represented one slice of institutional time, but it was a time that one gifted writer calls the time when hope and history rhyme. It was our hopes, and it was Georgia State's history. And so I'm going to share just two stories that really you've already seen some personality traits come out in earlier stories, and you'll see a reinforcement of those. But two stories where, through Ahmed's leadership, hope and history rhymed. They rhymed because he was an organizer as well as a visionary. He was convinced that if you talk to people long enough, you'll find something in common. And so he always looked for overlapping interests. When people disagreed, we just kept talking. And so one morning at 9 o'clock, I went into his office. He had scheduled a meeting with 3 people who didn't agree with him. And he needed their support for a particular policy. At 10 o'clock, he said to me, I've got to go meet with the provost, you keep them talking. And he came back at 11 o'clock. We had thankfully continued to talk. He pulled up his chair again, and he continued to keep us talking for at least another 2 hours until we all begged him to go get lunch. And I don't remember what the topic was. I don't remember who the participants were, but I have good reason to believe that on that day or sometime soon thereafter, the differing vantage points ended up finding common ground, because persuasion and persistence were 2 of his strong traits. And then sometimes he mapped those with sheer exhaustion to get movement in his direction. My other example is that hope and history rhymed because Ahmed valued equity. He crafted policies for merit equity, workload equity, pay equity. But the equity I'm going to focus on is knowledge equity. Ahmed was the key administrative force behind the creation of what was then the Department of African American Studies. It was 1992 when Black students occupied a building to protest the racism on campus and to demand a Department of African American Studies. Ahmed stepped up. He cautioned the upper administration not to call in the police. And he told Georgia State's president that the new department would be welcome in the College of Arts and Sciences. It was because of the students' activism and Ahmed's commitment that the upper administration agreed to the demand for a new department and the protest dissipated. So after the sit-in, Ahmed met with the president and provost to move ahead on this commitment. He took me as the associate dean for the social sciences. He took Dr. Jacqueline Rouse from the history department because she was active on the faculty committee that had been formed to shape the new department. In very concrete terms, Ahmed described the space needed to house a new department, the faculty required for the department, and the level of operating budget that was needed to support it all. One of the aforementioned top administrators said, "Oh no, we can't do that." Ahmed looked at him incredulously. And then, in an exasperated voice, Ahmed said, "You've already committed to a department. What do you think a department is?" And this was typical Ahmed. He found a clever way to highlight the hypocrisy without calling it by its name. We know through the history of Georgia State that he prevailed from that meeting. And for some time after the meeting, Dr. Rouse and I, whenever we saw each other, we'd say, as if in code, "What do you think a department is?" And he just laughed and laughed because that was a big victory. So it's with great admiration that I thank Ahmed Shukran. His gift was not only his leadership, but it was also the real joy that he experienced with colleagues in getting good things done. And he was a poet in his own way because he helped hope and history rhyme.
I don't have prepared notes, so I'm just gonna wing it, but that's my style, I guess. I actually came to GSU in 1997, and I'd already had tenure at UT Knoxville. So I was on a little faster track for tenure, and I got it 3 years later. In the meantime, I was on the Dean's Executive Committee, so I was in the rooms with very interesting people. Most interesting to me was Ahmed, an Egyptian geneticist. And I had, I had taken a lot of science classes when I was in an undergraduate school, and I took genetics, and it was my favorite class. So I thought, I can learn a lot from this guy. And no sooner as then I got tenure, I was tapped to go and become the Associate Dean of Fine Arts. Now, I'm not really a good person either with numbers or sitting in rooms for meetings. So I actually was called by David Blumenfeld 2 different times asking me if I wanted to do it. And I said, nah, I'm good. I'm happy where I am. I love teaching, blah, blah, blah. So I finally got the call from Ahmed to come for a meeting in his office. And I went in there still like absolutely firmly to say no. But Ahmed said, I never choose someone for this position that wants the job. And I thought, yeah, I want to be here. So I accepted, and then we started a plan to like make an exchange with a school in Egypt, an art school. And so Ahmed said, you put together the team from the art department and we'll all go. And I'm like, yeah! It was a really cool opportunity. So the first thing I remember was that, we're making this trip all the way across, many, many miles. And he said, okay, well, when you pack, you can only bring a carry-on luggage. And I'm like, oh, because I needed to have my snorkel gear in there. We were going to be in the Red Sea, And so I figured it out, and I learned so much about international travel from him just from doing that. Like, you're going to be better off if you don't have to check luggage anywhere, because, guaranteed you can lose it, and I do a lot. So anyway, we got whisked through the customs and the whole thing, and I just started to realize I was like a real VIP in this country, and we proceeded to go on these amazing tours, and we got to go down inside the fence and touch the Sphinx. And they told us that the last person who had done this was Jimmy Carter. So that was the start of this trip, and it just got better and better. And finally, by the end, we'd kind of done our work, and things were going well. And so Ahmed said, do you play blackjack? And I said, I have with my family in the kitchen table, but I really, I've never been in a real blackjack table. And and so he goes, okay, well, they're having a game tonight in the hotel. And so I'm like, okay, I'll go. And sure enough, we go into this back room, and this was serious blackjack. It was a circular table entirely filled with Egyptian men. I was the only woman, and it was, intimidating to say the least. And so Ahmed's sitting next to me, and he just coached me the whole time, and so I actually won a couple hands until I made a grave error, and that was that I can't remember exactly what happened. I either flipped a card accidentally that wasn't supposed to be, or I did something wrong, like seriously wrong. And all of a sudden, the men were up in arms, and I go, what's going on? He goes, they think you just changed the entire outcome of the game. So I was mortified, of course, and I wouldn't have ever been able to sit there without his calming presence. And, it was just amazing to share. I'm going to try not to cry because I'm super emotional. And I've never worked for a genius before. And he was one. He was a genius at social engineering. That's not my strong suit. And I just learned so much from being around him and seeing him operate that way with these huge 400 copy emails, and he would say, no, I go into his office sometimes to ask a question, and he'd be looking very carefully at this email that he just composed, and he goes, you really can't make a mistake when you're sending out an email to 400 people. And so, just his attention to detail, which I really appreciated, and we had some very interesting conversations between art and science. And I was really never more happy than, being in the College of Arts and Sciences. Now we have our own beautiful College of the Arts, but I like the combination. And so it was just a real honor and a privilege to do that, and I love all of it.
Well, I'm very honored to speak at this event, to see familiar faces to reacquaint with, and I am going to read my remarks, but I have to, listening to talk about the Science Center, I have to say Ahmed taught me everything that I knew about fundraising. And it was right after I made full professor. Ahmed showed up at my office in Cal Hall. Ahmed had never been to my office before. He comes in, he sits down. I thought, wow, the dean's here in my office. And he said, we're building this new Science Center. And we have to show the administration that, we're all behind it. And shall I put you down for 3,000 or for 5,000? And that was Ahmed. Ahmed was the best administrative mentor that I've ever had. He taught me skills of listening, of seeing the bigger picture, and the importance of understanding the budget and understanding the true cost of programs. I remember once at a national retreat on student success, someone was promoting a program that did not cost any money. And Carol and Tim, I think you were probably there at the meeting, and Ahmed sat kind of with his patient look on his face at the back of the room through a vigorous discussion, and finally he raised his hand. And he said, in my experience, all truly good programs cost money. And if they are worth doing, it's important to find the resources to support them. And, that really has stayed with me because he was absolutely right. Earlier, I sent around some remarks that I know some of you have read about my interactions with Ahmed. I don't need to repeat them, as much of it was touched on in the previous remarks and in the great video that Tim produced. So I want to focus on Ahmed after Georgia State, and I know many of us at Georgia State thought of Ahmed as ours, but so did many people at other institutions. I think that was the amazing thing. We've already heard that after he left Georgia State, he went on to be provost at Northeastern and then provost at UMass Lowell. And when I left Georgia State for New York, I was worried about finding a new support group, and I missed Ahmed's coaching. However, I found that there was a ready support group in peers from other CUNY campuses. And unbeknownst to me, one of them, Jim Steller, was provost at Queens College, and he had been dean of science under Ahmed at Northeastern. And Lexa Logue, who is the Executive Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs, convened a monthly meeting of all the provosts to talk about all the usual issues. And of course, there was always a spirited conversation that centered around costs of quality programs. And so I was guided by Ahmed's insights. After one of the meetings, Jim came up to me and he said, when you make arguments in academic council, he said, I can hear Ahmed speaking. Now, I didn't know who Jim was. I didn't know he knew Ahmed. I don't even think he knew I knew Ahmed. It's just he recognized, I was amazed that he could, recognize that training. And so Jim wrote me last week, knowing he may be on the Zoom meeting right now, but he wrote this just last week. And he said, Ahmed, also taught us how to be gentle while still being firm. Some of that was helped by his insightful ideas, but that personality, human trait, was the icing on the cake of working with and being mentored by Ahmed. And I think Jim really captured what many of us at Georgia State felt. Also, Elsa Nunez is president of Eastern Connecticut State University, and I had the pleasure of getting to know her while I was in the Northeast. Her husband was Robert Freeland, who was responsible for taking Ahmed away from us. And so Elsa spoke to me many times about her admiration for Ahmed's leadership, and she also wrote me in preparation for this event. Ahmed was so passionate about international collaborations. Everywhere he went, he built international connections with universities and made sure that students who were from other countries were well served. He traveled extensively as provost and made sure that these collaborations were authentic and workable. He brought a lot to the table in building university's reputation on being global. His work was impressive and substantive. Many countries remember him for his goodwill and his ability to work respectively with others. I think it's really important to know that the person we're talking about, that was really Ahmed, and he touched so many people. During the time in New York, I also had the good fortune to be enrolled in a leadership program, and to shout out Bob Correa, and was president of the University of Massachusetts system, and I sat through some of his cabinet meetings with system chancellors and provosts, including Ahmed. And Bob spoke so highly of Ahmed's work when he was at Lowell. And I even got to see Ahmed in full action again, administrative, and he had really done nothing but hone his skills from when he had left here. So in closing, I know I speak for many when I say that Ahmed was a good friend and a mentor. His lessons have stayed with all of us for a career. And I've always strived to prepare people I mentored to take the next step, even if it meant leaving for another institution. And that was something that I learned from Ahmed. And all else I can say is thank you.
We learned a couple of things from Ahmed. One is keep the food out there, but then ask you. We would never go for that until we had heard everyone that wanted to speak. And so are there others that would like to share reflections before we move to that? Move to the food.
I would. I just really a lot of what I want to say has been said. Number one is, I just have a memory. I'm Ahmed Abdelal, for those who don't know me. I came as an assistant professor in 1996. At that time, I remember, as was mentioned, Ahmed would come and meet with each department. He came and met with our department one time. This is just accents what others have said about it. He gave the example, because we were having a conflict over something, and he said, well, look, I'm going to talk to you, and talk to you, and talk to you, till you agree with me. I chuckle every time someone mentioned that about Ahmed. I'd also like to say, and Paula spoke to his advocacy in fighting for the Department of African American Studies, and not only African American Studies, but I know he made efforts to recruit professors of African descent in other departments, put resources toward it, and as well as those of us who were here, and Professor Carter could speak to this as well, he brought us together and tried to provide some support where a lot of times many colleagues in different departments weren't in Africana studies, where black people were in the majority, but kind of felt isolated in other places. So he brought us together and tried to provide some leadership and comfort to make Georgia State home for faculty of African descent on this campus. So when we think about, folks saying, well, Georgia State graduates more African Americans than any university in the United States, Ahmed has a nickel in that quarter. Thank you.
Anybody else? Marianne?
So I'm supposed to be closing this out. So what a wonderful legacy Ahmed leaves us, and how lucky we were at Georgia State to have him be Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences, and before that, a faculty member and chair of biology during the time he was. To me, the thing I remember most about Ahmed is his focus on collegiality and respect for everybody, for all the faculty, staff, and students. I think that was something that he always encouraged. The thing he did to make that happen was also that he brought us together with different people than we typically worked with. So he always had his parties, and communication would be invited, but we would also be invited with geology or history or a different department where we were interacting with people from other perspectives. And it made you value everybody's perspective and understand that we had a diversity of perspectives, but that we were all coming together for a common goal, which was clearly something he talked about. So I just want to end by saying that I think we were incredibly lucky, and that we all need to always remember the history and remember that how important Ahmed was to that history. I want to also remind everybody that there is a special giving page that was created. There is an Ahmed Abdelal Fellowship in Molecular Genetics and Biotechnology. And this award is given to outstanding graduate students for achievement in the field. There's a QR code on the event card if you have an interest in giving to it. And with that, I thank you for joining us today to celebrate Ahmed's life and to stay and, as Carol said, get to the food. So thank you all for coming.